Welcome, my name is Barbara Yarde and today I'm going to show you how to make some twisted hoop earrings. These are a really nice pair. The size of them are approximately inside diameter 65 millimeters, but you can make them larger or smaller, entirely up to you because the process is exactly the same. So let's get started. I have some 2mm square wire, because when you're doing a twist, square wire works better. Each piece of wire needs to be 65mm long, but I've actually cut a bit longer on either end because I'm clamping one bit into a vise and I'm going to clamp another end to my pliers and I'm going to twist. So that will be wastage that I have there. Next thing I need to do is clamp my wire into my vise and I'm going to start twisting. Now I'm just going to clamp my end of wire in my vise. So I want that nice and secure. The other end I'm gripping with a pair of flat nose pliers. I'm just going to hold my pliers tight and twist. And you can go as deep or as shallow as you like with your twists. I think I'm going to go quite deep with my twist. I quite like that. Keeping it taut as you twist and keeping a good grip on your pliers as you twist. Keep twisting till you get, and you can stop and have a look. Maybe I might do another 2 twists, and there we go, a nice taut twisted piece of wire. Let's take that out of the clamp, and this bit will be wastage, and that's why I said add a bit extra than you needed. I've taken my twist out of the vise and either end, so this bit here and this bit here will be cut away as wastage. Now I'm going to get my saw frame and just trim off my ends, which is wastage here. I'm going to file it now so that each end is nice and flat. And as I'm going for medium size hoops, each piece of wire that I'm going to round up is going to be 65mm long. So I need to cut 2 pieces of wire, 65mm on each one. So I'm going to mark my length with a felt tip pen, so 65. Right there, and I'm going to cut that with my saw frame. File my end again to make sure it's nice and flat. Going to measure 65 again. And again, exactly the same thing. Cut with my saw frame. now have 2 identical lengths of wire. Just make sure they are. I can file that one down a tiny bit more. So I want them to be exactly the same sizes. Now these are 2 65mm long pieces of wire. I'm going to make sure both ends are nice and straight before I move on. So I'm just going to file this in flat. And I think I'll use my emery stick. Next thing I have to do, I have them both here, is round them into a circle and then we will solder. Here I've got 2 pairs of half round pliers. When you're using your half round, make sure the half round is away from you and twist. And I'm going to grab my other pair, exactly the same thing, making sure my half round is away from me. And I'll twist to make a nice circle. You're not going to get a perfect circle because that's not what we're looking for. And you want your ends to touch, but it doesn't matter if they're not they don't touch perfectly, because this is going to be cut away when we go to make our half round. We just want to get them touching so that we can round this metal up into a nice round circle. So if it's a bit off your soldering, that is absolutely fine. So that's my first one, and it's a funny oval shape. I'm going to do the same thing for my second one. Just so they're just gently touching in the centre. Next thing I need to do is solder both of these loops shut, and for this I'm just going to use a couple of pieces of easy solder. I've now rounded or half rounded my earring wires, both on my soldering block. I'm just going to solder them using easy solder. Like I said, don't worry about how perfect the solder seam is, because that's going to be cut away anyway. So I'm just going to put some liquid flux on both my pieces, grab myself a couple of pillions of solder, and pop that. Just soldering my earring, I'm moving my heat around, so I need to heat the whole piece up so that the solder will flow nicely. That's my first one. Just going to now go on to my second one. Exactly the same thing. Heating it all the way around so that my easy solder will flow nicely. After I've done that, let them cool for a moment, and then I'll put them in, quench them in water and put them in my pickle. So both of these have been soldered. I'll quench them and pickle them, and then we'll round them up on our ring triplet. I've now taken my earrings out of the pickle. I've just popped one of them on my ring mandrel, and I'm going to tap that into a round circle. You don't want to tap too hard because you don't want to press down on any of the twists that you've done and lose that pattern. And for this, I'm using a rawhide mallet. When I've finished one side, I'm just going to flip it over and do exactly the same thing on the other side. And checking that I've got a nice round, and keep flipping it backwards and forwards till you get a nice round. That's one. And do exactly the same thing to the second one. And flip it over as before. Check to see it's a nice round. There we go. Now I've got my two rounds, I need to make sure both of them are flat. So I'm going to grab my steel block, place it on and gently tap to give it a flatness. Flip it over, tap the other side. I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the other one. So just tap, flip it over, and tap again, remembering to be very gentle because you don't want to get rid of that twist mark you've got there. So now I have two round flat hoops. To make my half rounds on my hoops, I need to take out a section. That's why I was saying don't worry about your soldering, because that's going to go disappear. Next thing I'm going to need are a pair of dividers and a ruler. So I've set my dividers to 10 millimeters. That's the space that I will be removing in the center of my hoops. Just going to grab my first hoop and just center it and mark. I'm going to mark one place, grab my felt tip and just mark it so I can actually see. So that's the first spot. Go back in on that spot and mark again, just there. So I've got a 1 centimetre mark right there. Now I'm just going to cut where I've marked. Now cut the other side. So this is my first one. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing on my second one. Just mark the first area with my felt tip pen and then go in on the second area. Mark that with my felt tip. exactly what I've done with the first one. I'm going to do with my second one. I'm going to cut that area away. Now I've got 2 half hoops. Next, just need to clean up each end just to make it nice and smooth and neat. And then I'll pick an end that I'm going to solder my seams on. So I'm going to use my emery stick just to smooth everything down and just round off one of the ends. So I don't want any sharp edges. So that's on one. I pick the second one, exactly the same thing. Just give it a slight gentle round on the ends, making sure I'm getting rid of all the sharp edges. Flip it over, just make sure the end I'm going this end and the other end is nice and sewed flat, and check the same thing on the other one. Just make sure the end is nice and flat. Next I need to make my earring pins, and to do that I'll be using 0.8 sterling silver wire. I've already started with one. I've put it in a pin vise. I've only put it in this just to hold it. It just gives a better grip. I've got something to grip at the bottom here. And what I want to do is just where the butterfly pushes over the earring, just want to put a little groove to give the butterfly back a grip. So first of all, just going to put a little groove all the way around. I'm just going to get my round file and just add to that groove just a little bit going round. I don't want a really deep groove because I don't want to weaken this wire because it's quite thin wire. So that's what I'm looking for, just a tiny little groove in there. I think I could take a little tiny bit more off. That's my first one. And I'm going to do the same thing with my second one. Let's just anchor it on and cut a little groove along. Get my round file and just add a little groove in there. Twisting it round. And while I've got my earring post, I'm just going to use a cup burr just to round off the end to make it smooth for when it goes into the earring. I've already got my cup burr on my pendant motor, so I'm just going to gently round that end off. So that's one. I'm going to do the same thing to the second one. around this again. Now I've got 2 pieces of wire that I've given a little groove and rounded on the end. These 2 pieces of wire are quite long, so I don't actually need them this long. It was just so I had something to grip in the pin vise. What I actually need to do now is cut these down to 11 millimeters. That's the standard length of a pair of earring backs. And just to make sure that the wire is nice and straight, I'm just going to roll it slightly. You can use a burnisher, but if you haven't got a burnisher, you can use the back of a steel pair of tweezers, absolutely fine. Just roll along, and I'll just do the second one. Just looking for a nice straight bit of metal. Next, I need to cut my 2 pieces of wire down to 11 millimeters. So first now I'm going to mark 11 millimeters on this first one, and then same thing on this second one. I'm going to mark 11 millimeters. And just for this, I'm going to use my snips and just trim the wire.
Hold on.
So I'm just going to gently trim. That's one. And then trim again. Two. Oh, I think I cut it too short. So I've got 11 millimeters on either one of those. Next I need to solder my earring post, but before that I'm going to make sure both ends are nice and flat. So they've got somewhere to nice flat end to sit on. So I'm just going to get my emery stick and just flatten the edge. That's one. Do the same thing on my second one. I'm going to grab my first earring and find the side that I didn't give a little curve to. Hold it that way. Grab my earring back and have it so it's this way. Just want to see, I might try and lift it so it sits on something that's a bit too high, so I'll just put it there. So what I need to do now is position that in place. And first I'm going to put some liquid flux, and I'm going to be using I'm going to be using hard solder to solder my earring posts on. What I'm going to do next is add some liquid flux to my earring post and my earrings. So just add that there. Position my earring post in place. and using some hard solder just going to pop that on the side there. Now I just need to solder all of that together, and again I'm not going to solder the earring post, I'm just soldering, heating up the earring at the beginning. So that's one earring post. I'm going to pop it on my steel block while I put the other one together. So exactly the same thing. I'm going to look for the end that I haven't rounded over, which is this top end here. Grab my earring post, making sure I've got it the right way. Flux my earring. Add my post to the end. Grab some more hard solder. So this is always the fiddly bit. So I'm going to solder my second piece. Exactly the same way, avoiding the earring post and just heating up the main earring. It's not actually the solder. Oops. And again, I'm going to pop this one on my solder steel block just to cool down, and then I'll pickle them both. I've now soldered on my posts and I've pickled them. As you can notice, see, I've just got a tiny bit of excess solder, which I'm just going to use a round needle file just to remove that excess solder, and an emery stick to make it nice and smooth. I don't want to take off too much because I don't want to make my twist disappear, so I'm being very careful. Now I'm going to go in with my emery stick, same thing, don't want to take off too much, just I want to smooth the lines slightly. Same with this one here, on this side, that side is fine. So I'm going to look and see it on my other earring, and I've got to just remove, twist it over, same thing. So these are both earrings. Now, what you need to do is clean them up. So there are a few ways to clean up your earrings. You can either put them in the polishing barrel and it'll give them a high shine, or if you want to, you can use a matte finish, a wire brush, or you can use wire wool. Or if you have a pendant motor, you can use any of the pendant pieces that come with your pendant motor. But today I'm going to keep it quite matte here, but I'm going to use a bit of wire wool just to enhance the finish a bit. So I'm just going to grab my wire wool, holding the post but not too tightly, and just pull it all the way around, trying to get into all the little grooves as much as possible. I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side, so I'm making sure I've got everything. So that's one. Now I'm going to go in with my second one, exactly the same thing. Pull the wire wool all the way along, rubbing through. I'm going to flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. Mind your earring posts, but if you do catch those and they bend slightly, you can just use a pair of parallel pliers just to pull them back into shape, or a pair of flat nose pliers will pull them back nicely into shape. So if you've twisted your earring posts and they've got a bit wonky, just grab your pliers and just gently put pressure on either side. Don't have to twist or anything. Just pull it there on either side, and then have a look at the other one. There you go. Just to give a little extra colour, I'm just going to use my burnisher just to highlight a couple of areas. So I get my steel block, I've got my steel burnisher, I'm just going to rub it, highlight the edges, just so that gives it a little bit more of a pop. I'll flip over. Again, do the same thing on the other side, and I literally am just highlighting the edges there, there and there. Do the same thing on the other pair. And for this I'm using a curved burnisher, but a straight nose burnisher will do exactly the same thing. Flip it over. Again, do the same thing on the other side. And there we go. I've now shown you two styles of hoop. The first hoop that we saw has a slightly more of a cutout, and this is a half, practically a half, and you really do see a half on this. But this one still has a full hoop finish, so when you put it in, you don't actually see any space, so it looks like a full hoop earring. This one has much of a more of a high shine on it, and for this one I put it in the polishing barrel, and that gave me the high shine that you can see there. And don't forget to buy some butterfly backs for your earrings. So my gap between the earrings I've just shown you how to make is 10 millimeters, and if you want a slightly larger gap, that gap is 15 millimeters, so it's just an extra 5 millimeters on your half hoop, deciding whatever design you like. And those sizes work on whatever size hoop you do, so whether you go really, really big or much, much smaller. The 1 centimeter, 10 millimeters and 15 millimeters works on all sizes. Thank you for joining me on this tutorial. If you'd like to see get more information, please look at the Jewellers Academy and share your work with us on Instagram and Facebook. See you on another course soon.